Alright, Custom Menu B. This is where we customize all the body button functions and different ways those interact. So, button function. This is where you can set all your different body buttons to custom functions of your choice. Function 1, this is on an EM1. I have two function buttons, the record button, the AEL button, two body buttons. I don't use a grip, otherwise these two would function, and then this is the lens button. This is the directional pad. So I set my function 1, and again, these are just where I have my camera set at the moment. I'll go over some customized button layouts for specific genres a little bit later. But I set my function 1 to, it's right here, to be on my AFL button. And as we went over in menu 1, I have my autofocus set to activate with that. So now this becomes my focus button, and my shutter button is really just to, fire the shutter. Right now I have my function button 2 set as simulated OVF. I change this button all the time depending what kind of things I'm shooting and what my scenario is. But again, you go in and you have a giant list of items to select from. So right now I have that set to SOVF. My record button is actually set to another focus button. I use that a lot for ground level shooting. We'll go over that later. You can just go into all of these and set each button to where you prefer it for your style of shooting. And again, we'll go over some custom scenarios later. If you don't have a grip, these two buttons will do absolutely nothing. And if you don't have a lens that has the lens function button, like the Pro Series lenses, this will do nothing as well. The directional button, I have this set right now to select my focus point, where it is on the grid. You can also go in and change that. Wrong way. So these two items that says right function and down function, those are grayed out because those are using the directional pad. If you did want those to work, you can set your directional pad to direct function, and then you can set each direction to be a custom function as well. That's going a little too much for me. I don't need that many custom functions, but if you do, feel free to set that in that way, and then you can come up to these and set them to various functions. I keep mine as a focus point selector. Okay, so going back out. Next one, we have dial function. This dictates which way your dials operate. So, for example, if you're in shutter priority mode, in shutter speed priority mode, I have my rear dial set to control my shutter, your shutter speed. Excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself here. And I have my front dial set to control exposure compensation. You can switch these or set them to flash compensation or two adjustments for your shutter speed, or reverse them. Again, I like to set my rear dial to be my actual component, so my shutter speed or my aperture, and my front dial to be the opposing adjustment. So for example, in aperture priority, I set the F number to be my rear dial, my exposure compensation to be the front. In manual, I set the aperture to the rear, shutter to the front. You can set this how you prefer, based on what you're used to. Menu, I leave that default. And for playback, I like the rear dial to be the magnification, and my front dial shuttles between the images, so forward and backwards between them. Again, you can adjust those to be however you like. You can reverse them around. So going back out of there, dial direction, I leave these on dial 1. This means as I rotate my front dial to the right, I go with faster shutter speeds, and as I go to the left, I go with slower ones. These are things that are kind of left over from other systems I'm used to using, Hasselblad's Canons, for example. If you're a Nikon shooter and you have them going the other way around, feel free to turn them to dial mode 2, and it's reversed. But it's totally your preference. Mode dial function. This is probably grayed out on yours at the moment, unless you have programmed some My Sets already. Once you have programmed my sets, you can go in and decide where on the command dial you want to set these. So if you overwrite your record or manual button, for instance, on your dial, you won't be able to use those. Those will activate your My Set, and as you turn through, you'll have your aperture priority, your shutter, and then if that was set to your My Set 1, that's your My Set 1, not manual mode anymore. Same goes for video and other modes. So these are 3 modes I don't really use that often, so I've overridden them with the My Sets. You can, if you don't use manual mode, feel free to use that. It's personal preference, but that's what it's doing. This setting is overwriting your command dial settings. Your lever function, if you have a lever on a EM5 Mark II or an EM1, I set mine to mode 4. This controls mode 4 and 5, just reverses the way the custom buttons work. I'm sorry, mode 3 and mode 4. Mode 2 and 1 allows when the lever is down that your front and rear control wheels will automatically adjust ISO and white balance. I'm not too keen on that. You can turn it off. And mode 5 is just lots of switching between the custom functions, your customized autofocus functions. I like mode 4. I like to have a few extra custom buttons. Once we get into specific setups for genres, we'll look more into this. So I just set mine on mode 4. Custom lever setting 2. This I keep off. This allows you to, when the lever's down, you can access your bracketing functions directly and your flash compensation functions directly. I very rarely dive into those, and if I am adjusting flash, it's usually manually on my flashes, so I leave this off. Again, it's based on what you use. It's really learning about yourself as a photographer and setting the camera up to that more than hard settings for the camera to function. So that's menu B.